Tencent's popularity may help it avoid trouble with Beijing. But its vast power could still squelch innovation in the world's largest online market. A few months after Wang Xing founded a Groupon-like e-commerce service called Meituan, he learned that China's biggest internet company, Tencent, had started a similar venture. "Is there any business that Tencent wouldn't do?" he asked. Mr. Wang's quote led a 2010 magazine article about Tencent with a headline so famously profane. Think the rough Chinese equivalent of an F-bomb. That two top editors were fired shortly after it was published. The cover depicted Tencent's mascot, a chubby penguin wearing a red scarf, stabbed with knives, blood dripping to the floor. Dramatic, perhaps, but back then the Chinese technology industry considered Tencent to be public enemy no. 1. It wouldn't hesitate to copy somebody else's idea and drive the upstart out of business. Its top executives were confronted at industry conferences and in media interviews. Entrepreneurs called it the industry's most brazen copycat. More than a decade later, the Chinese government is finally reining in the country's most powerful technology companies, but not, at least for now, Tencent. While the company has drawn small penalties, the government has focused most of its attention on Tencent's archrival, Jack Ma's Alibaba empire. The government's next target? It might be Tencent's one-time rival, Meituan. Only China's antitrust regulators know why Tencent hasn't drawn their full attention so far. As China's biggest and most powerful technology company, with an outsized power to pick winners and losers, it still might, and probably should. Reuters has reported that the Chinese government is considering a fine of at least $1.54 billion against Tencent for failing to properly report past acquisitions and investments for antitrust reviews. If true, that would be smaller than the record $2.8 billion fine the government imposed on Alibaba in April. But one reason may be that the industry is no longer clamoring for somebody to take Tencent down. In fact, it has in many ways become the industry's biggest and most deep-pocketed cheerleader. The company has managed to revamp its image by throwing money at the little guys and buying off competitors rather than driving them out of business. No longer public enemy no. 1. Tencent now enjoys a status akin to an enlightened ruler of an expansive tech empire. A big chunk of the Chinese internet industry now belongs to what's known as the Tencent ecosystem. That includes the hundreds of companies that it has invested in, including Mr. Wang's. Tencent is now Meituan's biggest shareholder, with a 21% stake. Meituan didn't respond to a request for comment. China's tech companies didn't fall when Tencent was copying them, wrote a widely shared blog post. They lost their will to fight back and surrendered when Tencent held out a check.